Today we're diving into a really ancient promise, the complete and total end of craving. But we're not just stopping there. We're going to look at how modern neuroscience is actually revealing the exact brain wiring that could make this radical idea a biological reality. So let's just jump right in. For thousands of years, right, spiritual traditions have been talking about this idea of liberation from suffering, the state where you're free from that endless cycle of wanting things. But what if that wasn't just some nice philosophical idea? What if it's actually a description of a tangible biological state your brain can be in? I mean, can you physically alter the very structure of your brain so that craving just stops? That's the huge question we're digging into today. To even start to answer that, we have to go back to where the claim first came from. Our story really begins in the earliest Buddhist texts, the suttas, which laid out this incredibly radical path not just to manage our desires, but to completely end them. The way these ancient texts diagnosed our problem is just fascinating. They said our suffering doesn't just come from the obvious cravings we feel every day. No, it stems from something much, much deeper. These things called anusaya, or latent tendencies. You can think of them like these dormant volcanoes of desire, or maybe like the source code of our mental programming, buried deep in our minds just waiting for the right trigger to erupt. They're working completely beneath our awareness, driving our reactions and keeping us stuck. And here's the crucial part, the sheer scale of the solution they offered. The Buddha's Eightfold Path wasn't some coping mechanism. It was presented as more of a surgical tool, designed to get right to the very root of the problem and pull it out completely. The goal is nirvana, a state that's described as the total end of these latent tendencies, putting out the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion for good. A pretty bold claim. Okay, so that's the ancient promise. Yeah, let's fast forward a couple of thousand years and step into a modern neuroscience lab. If these powerful hidden cravings actually exist, where in the world, inside this 3-pound universe of a brain, do they come from? Well, meet our prime suspect, the ventral striatum. This little region tucked deep in the primal part of our brain is the absolute core of our reward system. It's the part that lights up when you see, smell, or even just think about something you desperately want, whether that's a cigarette, a donut, or a notification on your phone. It is the biological engine driving those latent tendencies that the ancient texts were talking about. So if the ventral striatum is this powerful engine that's always screaming, I want, does our brain have any kind of braking system? Is there a way to manage all that raw primal power? Well, the answer, thankfully, is yes. Let's take a look at the brain's very own control system. So how does this braking system even work? Well, in one study with smokers, researchers showed them pictures of cigarettes. Now, when they were told to just think about the immediate pleasure, the now, their cravings shot up. But when they used a super simple mental trick, just thinking about the long-term consequences, the later, their reported craving dropped by over 30%. That's a huge effect, all from just a simple shift in thinking. So what's actually going on in the brain to make that happen? I know this slide looks a little complicated, but the main idea is really simple. What you're seeing is the brain's CEO, a region up at the front called the prefrontal cortex, sending a signal down to the engine room, that ventral striatum we just met. When you think about long-term consequences, the CEO region wakes up and basically tells the engine room to cool it. It literally turns down the volume on the craving signal. This pathway is the key. The more the CEO is in charge, the quieter the engine gets, and the less craving you feel. Okay, so we've got an ancient practice that aims to totally wipe out craving and a modern understanding of the brain circuit that controls it. This next part, this is the bridge that connects the two. How can an ancient practice like mindfulness directly target and strengthen this very specific neural circuit? There's this fascinating therapy called mindfulness-oriented recovery enhancement, or MORE for short, and it gives us a huge clue. This thing combines mindfulness training with other techniques for reappraisal and savoring. Researchers used it with a group of smokers to see if they could change not just their behavior, but the underlying brain activity that was driving it all. And the results were pretty remarkable. After just 8 weeks of this mindfulness training, they scanned the smokers' brains again. And the shift was crystal clear. Before, seeing cigarette cues would light up their reward circuits like a pinball machine. After, that reactivity was way down. But here's where it gets really good. It wasn't just about weakening the response to the bad stuff, it was about strengthening the response to the good stuff. Their brain's reaction to natural, healthy rewards, like a beautiful picture of a landscape, actually increased. They were fundamentally retuning their entire reward system. So this is the really critical point. The more studies suggest that mindfulness isn't just a temporary cognitive trick you use in the moment, like that think of the future strategy. The evidence points to something much more profound, a durable physical rewiring of those circuits between the prefrontal cortex and the striatum. It's a fundamental restructuring of what the brain finds rewarding, shifting it away from addictive things and toward wholesome, healthy experiences. All right, let's tie all of this together. We've seen an ancient claim, a modern brain circuit, and a practice that can literally rewire it. So how does this all add up to create a new biological reality, one that starts to look an awful lot like the freedom those ancient texts were describing? Let's think about how we normally operate, using a model from cognitive science. A lot of the time, our consciousness just runs on autopilot. You get an input, like the smell of coffee, which triggers a state, that latent tendency to crave, which then leads almost automatically to an action, like going to buy the coffee. It's this deterministic, almost robotic loop. Input, state, action. Over and over again. Now this is where mindfulness comes in. It acts like a powerful circuit breaker. By training your mind to be aware of this process as it's happening, you insert a moment of knowing. You see the input, you feel the craving start to bubble up, but you are no longer forced to automatically act on it. You can just observe it. The chain is broken. You're watching the program run instead of being the program. And this brings us to a really fascinating and deep idea, what one paper calls the freedom paradox. And it sounds completely backward, right? How could realizing you're part of a deterministic cause and effect system possibly make you free? Well, the paradox kind of dissolves when we redefine what we mean by freedom. Maybe true freedom isn't some magical free will that exists outside of cause and effect. Perhaps freedom is a neurobiological achievement. It's a trainable skill. It's the state you get to when your brain has been so thoroughly rewired through practice that its default operations, its automatic deterministic loops, are no longer driven by unconscious conditioned craving, but by wisdom and clarity. You become free from the old condition. And this leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. We started this whole journey with an ancient spiritual goal, described with words like nirvana and the end of suffering. We've ended up talking about frontal-striatal circuits, reward processing, and cognitive control. So could it be that what the ancients called enlightenment is, in the language of the 21st century, the ultimate brain hack, a profound, achievable restructuring of our own biology that creates a lasting state of well-being, totally free from the tyranny of craving? It really seems like modern science is just beginning to map the path.